This is Tracy Lopez, and you've tuned in to a video regarding the basics of navigating ALEKS. And I'd also like to parallel it to a textbook like you and I were used to using when we were in school. First off, this is more or less their homepage. You will hear your child refer to their pie, and this is what they're talking about when they say that. The circle graph, that is a visual representation of their progress so far through the skills in ALEKS. The skills in ALEKS, here, this number at the top shows the number of skills the child has shown mastery in so far regarding the Indiana state standards, in this case 137. And the number of skills here is the total number of skills that the child needs to master of the Indiana state standards. In this case, the total number, which would be 300. So the skills, or the number of skills, are directly linked to those Indiana state standards, and the teachers have pulled in or synced up the Indiana state standards that we're going to cover and track progress on through the ALEKS program. There will be other skills that we'll practice through projects or problem solving and other activities, but in the ALEKS program, this will be the total number of Indiana state standards we will cover. That would be equating it to the textbook. It would be like the entire textbook that the teacher would have covered. Those would be equal to the total number of topics in their pie. The number 137, as I mentioned, is the number of skills they've mastered so far, and that number will change, will increase over time, and after an assessment may drop a little bit if they did not continue to show mastery on certain skills. And then they would practice those more to assess again and gain more mastery of them. The pie is broken down into major slices. In this case, in this case 6 slices. Major concepts that the state is requiring the students to know: geometry, algebra, measurement, percents, etc. And those slices could be equated to chapters of a textbook. While the ALEKS program only has 6 slices in this particular course, a textbook would usually have 12 or 15. So you could say each slice of the pie would be like 2 or 3 chapters in a textbook. Each slice has a dark and a light section. The dark part represents the skills that the child has already mastered, and the light portion of the green here, or any section, represents the skills left yet to be practiced or mastered. You can also see a specific number of skills. So in this pie, there are 65 skills regarding whole numbers, and this child has shown mastery of 56 of them. Inside each slice, when you hover over them, up will come hyperlinks that you can see. Here covering different skills of geometry, here different skills of whole numbers. Right now, this child has 9 skills left to show mastery on in whole numbers. The pie slice will not necessarily pop up all 9 of those skills. Like right here, you only see 8 of those 9 skills remaining for mastery actually available for the child to learn. And this is one key feature of the ALEKS program. It takes into account the specific 137 skills that this child has shown mastery on, and only opens up the skills that they are actually ready to learn, meaning they have the prerequisite skills they need in order to learn the content that's open. So this one skill of whole numbers that is not open or available to view and practice, there is something else in the skill set, in the 300 skills that the child needs to learn before that last one will be opened. This sometimes will cause a pie slice to be more or less locked. So if there's just 1 or 2 more left, or sometimes there's a lot left, but a link will pop up that says there's nothing left to practice at this time, or something to that effect. Just the child will avoid that slice for a while and move on to practice something else, and then can check back periodically to see if those skills have been opened, because they have those prerequisite skills now. So each of these hyperlinks I would equate to a textbook in the title of the section of a textbook. So if you opened up a textbook to Chapter 2, Section 4, there would be a title, And that would correspond to one of these hyperlinks. It would be a title from the section of a textbook. We have talked with the students to try really hard not to be intimidated by the titles. Sometimes they're long or have technical math wording, but not to be intimidated by the title, just to click on it and open up to the first question and see if they know how to do it. Sometimes the title can be overwhelming, but the skill itself they actually know how to do. For example, measures of central tendency. Children usually don't recognize what that is, but if they clicked on it, they would find, oh, it's mean, median, and mode. And they would, they've had prior experience with that. So not to be intimidated by the titles. When the child clicks on a link, it opens up practice problems for them. And this would essentially turn into when we used to do practice problems in a workbook, or if the teacher assigned practice problems in the textbook. So, all right, we had our lesson, teacher taught prime factorization, and then it was now our job to go practice through the workbook or numbers 1 through 15 in a specific section of a chapter of a book. But here, the child's going to click into prime factorization, and they're going to practice one question at a time. So in their composition notebook, they will show their work and anything that they need to do in order to solve that problem, and then they will click next. And one of two things will happen. One thing will happen, and that will be that they get immediate feedback, whether they were correct in their answer or incorrect in their answer. And I really love this feature about ALEKS because it gives them, if it's right, that confidence that, okay, I'm on the right track, I am doing this correctly. Or if it's incorrect, it will keep them from doing multiple problems incorrectly. Versus when we were doing the entire workbook page at night and then coming in the next day and the teacher going through it with us, if that ever happened to you, you found that you missed lots of problems and you were training your brain the incorrect way to do it. With this immediate feedback, they get that confidence, or they know that they need to adjust their thinking straight away or ask a question, a follow-up question with the teacher to clarify an error that they're making. Or they can click out and ask their teacher later on at another time. They could click out and try a different skill. When practicing a skill, if a child gets several questions in a row correct straight off or straight away, the program will recognize quickly that they already have mastery of that skill. And so just after a few questions, the system will say, hey, we think you've got this skill, and then they can go practice another one. And that skill, the hyperlink will be removed from the pie slice, and 1 point will be added to their total number. When they get to that page that says, hey, we think you've mastered this skill, they can click done and go back to their pie to choose another skill to practice, or there's a link that says more practice. So if the program says, hey, we think you understand this, but the child still lacks that confidence, they're always welcome and are encouraged to click that more practice button so they can just reiterate or just solidify that information a little bit more. If a child gets some questions right and some questions wrong, when a question is answered incorrectly, it's important to know that the child will be required to answer additional questions to ensure that solid understanding of the information. And I think that makes sense. They need more practice to reiterate the information correctly. But it does reward the skills that you do know already, so you don't have to do an entire workbook page worth of skills to prove that you already know it. It will recognize that. Here on the screen, you see an additional button, an explain button. And that parallels to a textbook in that if you went to a textbook, chapter 7, section 4, and the first couple of pages has examples worked through a written explanation. It has definitions, any important facts, those sorts of things. Your explain button is going to be that same feature that you would see in that part of the textbook. When you click on the explain button, you see hyperlinks that will help define certain things. Like if you're not sure what a product is, you can click on that and it will help you with examples to understand, or a definition. Oftentimes, if a child chooses to click on the explain button, the written explanation here will be enough of a reminder for that child to say, hey, oh, I remember last year my teacher talking about factor trees. I remember doing this. And they can go ahead and go back to their practice. You can also, oftentimes, there'll be the button that says another explanation there, or to see a different way of approaching the same problem here where you see the link for another factor tree. If you clicked on another explanation, it would obviously bring up a second example so you could have further clarification. The child is welcome to click on the explain button or not click on the explain button. Some students really like to see that written explanation. It's enough to trigger in their mind that recall, and other children shy away from it, and that's perfectly fine. When the child has a question on a skill, they should always ask their teacher, and we will be happy to help. This wraps up the main portion of, this wraps up the basics of navigating ALEKS, and I hope you can see how that certain parts of the ALEKS program correspond well, or you can see the parallel to the textbooks that we used to use in school. Thank you for tuning in.